My Lords, I very much, in speaking to my amendments, I very much welcome the Minister's announcement and also his willingness to talk to noble Lords on numerous occasions over the last 4 days. Can I also welcome the review he's announcing alongside the noble Lord Lucas's amendments. My Lords, I'd already decided to put my support behind Lord Lucas. I prefer the term woman, but as he said, I'm very happy with the substitution of person by mother. My Lords, I always wanted to see this bill delivered, that the Minister can get her maternity leave, but also to be clear and respectful to women, and I'm delighted that we've come to this outcome. There's no doubt that the use of the word person rather than woman or mother is not a technical issue that should ever have been decided by Parliamentary Council. My Lords, it goes right to the heart of government's attitude towards women, women's rights, and the ability of them to speak clearly about situations where their sex matters. And my Lords, we have, I think, in recent months heard increasingly government concerns about free speech in this country. I do say, though, that when it comes to issues to do with sex and gender, the government has been remarkably silent. And I know many noble Lords have received really countless messages from mainly women since our debate on Monday. I've had over 200 messages. And what comes through is their fear that the hard-won rights of women and of their marginalisation in recent years. I was very struck by the comments of one senior NHS consultant who said, "Language matters and sex-based rights depend upon that language." You are, she said, aware of what happens when women try to express the similar concerns that noble Lords expressed on Monday. What happened to Rosie Duffield was disgusting, but the silence from her colleagues was also chilling and very disturbing. And other comments I received: if we can't speak meaningfully about sex, we will never end sexism, violence against women and girls, or misogyny. Another one: I've campaigned for equality across the board all my life, and yet I'm dismissed now as a bigot and a transphobe for even trying to raise concerns at all. Now, as I too find it chilling that those who speak up for women's rights can find themselves accused of trans hate, are subject to horrific abuse, particularly if they are women. And my Lords, that really is a sign of free speech under threat. Now, at second reading, I listened very carefully to the noble Baroness Lady Brinton because she was one of the two speakers that disagreed with the general theme of our debate. And she then referred to the importance of language used in legislation remaining inclusive, and she referred to trans men believing that using the word woman excludes them and therefore removes their rights. But as Lewis Perry pointed out in this week's edition of New Statesman, in relation actually to the Brighton NHS Trust's adoption of gender-inclusive language, one of the risks is that if you exclude one group to include another, you impact on their rights. And of course it goes much wider than health. By raising women from the language of the law, how is that inclusive? Where is the equivalent pressure to change references to men in public health campaigns? Prostate Cancer UK does not come under fire for transphobia for talking about men's health issue. It's women's safety, dignity and inclusion which is compromised when organisations do not feel confident in maintaining the ordinary privacy of separate spaces for changing and washing. It's women's specialist services, like rape crisis centres, that are being replaced by mixed-sex services. The latest example being very recently in Brighton, with the contract being withdrawn from Brighton's Women's Aid. It's women's specialist services and charities where the staff are afraid to speak up for fear of losing funding. And it's women in the workplace who feel threatened if they speak up for their rights under the Equality Act. And it's female academics who are being no platform and silenced because they're being seen as the wrong kind of feminist. And it's the women MPs in the other place who get the hate and abuse. My lords, that is not inclusion. I support trans rights and I support women's rights. Sometimes there can be a tension between them. That's why the Equality Act of 2010 was so carefully drafted, to recognise that, with separate characteristics and principles for reconciling, balancing in rights when they came into conflict. The legislation uses the word woman, not just in terms of defining the protected characteristics of sex, but also throughout the Act, in all sections related to pregnancy, maternity and lactation. Now, all institutions have a responsibility to avoid discrimination in relation to each of the 9 protected characteristics as laid out in that Act. But it's increasingly common to find in the equality policies of many, many public bodies that the Equality Act characteristics of sex and gender reassignment have been replaced by a single word, gender. And the protected characteristics of pregnancy and maternity are forgotten very often. So, my lords, how then can those organisations assess how their policies impact on people in relation to sex and gender reassignment when they collapse the 2 categories into one? Furthermore, many of them are advised by organisations that tell them that even thinking about the possibility of a conflict of rights is transphobic. The result, of course, is that single and separate sex services, which are enshrined in the Equality Act 2010, are coming under increasing attack, not least from the misleading guidance issued by many government departments, local authorities and the EHRC. My lords, I'm very grateful to the noble lord, the Minister. This is a turning point. This is an important moment, but there's much more to do to protect women's rights and the other rights enshrined in the Equality Act. My lords, I'm certainly not going to move my amendment, but I do want to thank all noble lords who've given enormous support to this cause. I'm very grateful.